Hey, in today's video, we're going to talk about whether or not it's better to actually go ahead and buy a house, save up for a down payment, or if we should actually be just renting. A lot of people make the argument that we should be saving up for a down payment on a house. That's the ideal scenario, and that's a dream to own our own house. Other people think it's more of a better financial decision to go ahead and rent. By the end of the video, I'm going to provide you with a quick, easy formula that you can use to figure out if it's better for you to rent or actually buy. Alright, to figure out which option is better from a financial perspective, we're going to talk about the sunk cost rule. These are essentially the unrecoverable costs associated with owning a home that we can't get back. This typically totals anywhere from 4 to 7%. It includes property taxes, maintenance fees, insurance, and the cost of our money. Basically, when we go to loan from a bank, how much is that interest we're going to be paying on it? Property taxes are typically around 1.5% of the actual property value. So if a property is $500,000, then the taxes could be $7,500 a year, which is around $600 a month. If you factor in annual maintenance, that could be around 1% of the total property. We have insurance that is 0.5% annually, and the cost of money. Basically, like I said, when we go to a bank and we want a loan because we're putting on 10 or 20% down, we have to get a loan for the rest. It's anywhere from 3 to 4%, depending on the A lending that we go ahead and use. Could be more if we go with private lending if we can't get the loan from the banks. And this totals 6%, so we're going to go a little bit lower than that. We're going to use 5% in this formula that I'm about to show you. And there's also something we need to take into consideration, and that is the fact that there is the opportunity cost of our money. Basically, saying that if we actually went ahead and invested the down payment rather than put the down payment into the house, we could potentially be getting greater returns, because if we are renting, then we're going to be paying a small amount monthly while we have the potential down payment, nest egg, invested in the stock market, giving a rate of return of an average of 8% annually. Let's say we're getting that 8% return annually on our investment in the stock market, and we go ahead and rent. Now, we have to factor in the fact that we could be earning more money because that down payment is in the stock market earning 8%. Let's say the down payment is $80,000. 8% on $80,000 is a good $6,400 a year. So you could be making $6,400 a year from investing the money rather than renting. Like I said, the sunk cost rule can be anywhere from 4 to 7% depending on where you live, depending on where all these different things are, because obviously there's no set in stone numbers for all these different factors here. So it depends highly on where you live, and it can be anywhere from 4 to 7%. In this example, I'm using 6%, so we're going to be a little conservative, and when I give you this formula right now, we're going to use 5%, okay? So we're going to say that our sunk cost rule, we're going to say that our unrecoverable costs are 5%. This is the formula. Purchase price times 0.05, because that equals 5%, divided by 12, because there's 12 months in the year. We are going to get a number, a figure, and this figure is the monthly rent that is equal to the property that we would potentially purchase. Before we dive into it, I'll give you a heads up and a little secret. If you live in any large metropolitan city like Vancouver or Toronto in Canada, then you're far better off going ahead and actually renting and not buying and owning. I'm going to tell you exactly why, but if you live in more of the smaller areas on the outskirts of them in Kitchener, Barrie, Waterloo, Hamilton, these kind of areas, it might be much better off to go ahead and actually buy. If we want to move into a condo or a house and we look at the purchase price, the property value. If the property value of the potential place we want to move into is $700,000, then if the rent is less than $2,916 a month, it would be a better financial decision to rent rather than buy it. Now here's where it could potentially make sense to buy a house. If we're living in those places like Kitchener, Waterloo, Hamilton, on the outskirts, maybe Barrie, places away from the major cities, then we will find houses for $500,000 potentially. And when you find one for $500,000, it would make sense to buy if we could rent for over $2,000. So if the rent is over $2,000, then it would be better to buy. And if we talk about something that's $1 million, we're looking at Toronto. Literally everything is $1 million in Toronto. So if you find something to rent for less than $4,000 a month, it's a better financial decision to go ahead and rent rather than buy. And there's something else we got to take into consideration here, because we have to take into consideration of the opportunity cost that we are missing by putting in the 10 or 20% down payment into these homes or condos that we could be getting if we actually had that down payment working for us in the stock market or in another investment. Because if we're buying a $500,000 property with 20% down, that's $100,000. And we could be having $100,000 working for us in the stock market with an average annualized return of 8%. That's quite average. So if you have $100,000, we can have our $100,000 at 8%. So you times it by 0.08. So you can be getting $8,000 a year just for having that $100,000 invested in the stock market. Average, just put it in, let it hang out. You can get $8,000 a year brought back to you, rather than when you have this invested and you're going to be losing the sunk cost of 5% on the property. Now you're thinking, okay, this is not correct because you're forgetting about appreciation. And you're right, there is the factor of appreciation. And let's say that real estate appreciates at 3% a year. It's been known to appreciate at 3% a year. So if we have that $500,000 property and it's appreciating at 3% a year, we're going to be getting $15,000 back, right? So now we have $15,000 that could be potentially going up in our property. So we can have $15,000 a year being added to this because we went ahead and bought the home, okay? Here's the catch though. The sunk cost rule states that we are losing 5% of our money. If you rent for less than $2,000 a month, and it's a $500,000 property, and you had that $100,000 that you would have put in the down payment actually in the stock market, giving you an 8% return, then you would essentially be increasing your net worth. You'd be gaining more money just by renting, because you're renting for less than $2,000 a month. The property value is $500,000 or more, and you're investing the difference that you would have put into the down payment for the house at an average annualized return of 8% a year. You would be noticing that you would be saving more money and increasing your net worth faster than if you actually went ahead and put the $100,000 in this $500,000 property. These are just hypothetical scenarios, but if you work out a lot of different scenarios, you're going to find that more times than not, you're going to actually save more money and increase your net worth quicker if you go ahead and rent rather than buy in these scenarios using this kind of formula. Now, I didn't even include and talk about some additional fees that could come up, like land transfer tax if you already owned a property, you want to move into another property, or things like home inspection and all the little research that comes into play, and the small fees that come into play when we're actually looking at purchasing the house in the first place. There's all those small fees that can add up, that can add on and make it even a little bit worse of an investment to buy a house rather than to rent. So not even considering these numbers, but this would all automatically skew the equation a little bit in more of a favor of renting. If we included them in, it'd be better to rent more likely in more scenarios than if we didn't include them in those prior calculations. Just wanted to touch on that real quick. Now you can use this equation another way. If you didn't know the purchase price because you're looking at renting and you want to know if renting is a better decision than buying, and you only know the monthly rent, then what you're going to do is look at how much does it cost you each month to rent the property you're potentially looking at moving into, multiply it by 12 because there's 12 months. Whatever that figure is, you're going to divide it by our sunk cost rule. Here we're using 5%, so it's 0.05, and that's how you're going to get the actual purchase price. So if you're looking at a place to potentially rent, and the rent is $1,500 a month, all in with utilities included, all your fees, whatever the fees are, total, everything's $1,500 a month. You're going to multiply that by 12 and then divide it by our sunk cost rule, and we'll get the total of $360,000. What this essentially means is that if you can actually buy the property that you're potentially looking at renting for $360,000 or less, then it's a better financial decision to buy the property. If the purchase price of this property, if you look at it and you check out the property value, it gets appraised, and it gets appraised at $500,000, and you're paying $1,500 a month in rent to live there, then it is clearly a better financial decision to go ahead and pay the $1,500 a month and invest the difference. Again, this is the key. This is always the key. invest the difference. What makes this a wiser financial decision to rent rather than own is if you actually invest the difference. Because if we put our money in the down payment, then we can't invest it. It gets locked up. It gets tied up. We can't now invest that money, right? But if we go ahead and rent and invest the difference at an average of 8% or more, then it is going to be a far better decision to go ahead and rent rather than buy the property if the property is over $360,000. And right now, where I live, anywhere that is $1,500 a month in rent, that property is going to be costing around $500,000. So it makes sense to go ahead and rent rather than to buy. Now we know whether it's a better financial decision from a pure quantitative perspective on whether it's better to buy or rent. But there's so many other things we got to consider. We got to consider a lot of other factors that don't actually just relate to the money, because even if something is a little bit less of a financial decision, it could be better for us based on our scenario. So we're going to want to take in some other factors. Probably the biggest one is actually mobility. Do we want the freedom knowing that within a year or 2 years or 3 years we can move, or we can go and do other things and go live in a different part of the world or a different area? If we do, then we clearly are going to want to rent. Maybe we have a nice stable career, a nice stable job, and 2 years down the line, some job opportunity comes up in another area. Well, now we have to move. And if you bought the property, you're now going to have to sell the property, and there's going to be a commission on that goes to the agent, where we're going to lose out on some even more money. And it might not be a good idea to buy in that scenario. Do you feel that being mobile is one of the top priorities in your life? If it is, then you're clearly going to want to rent in basically every single scenario, no matter what. We also want to consider the financial constraints. Maybe we might not be able to be approved for a loan by the banks. We got to understand, maybe we have some kind of issues with credit. There could be a lot of things that are basically not allowing us to go ahead and even purchase a home, put the down payment on it. And we might have to go to B lending or C lending, a private lending, a firm that has higher interest rates. And if there's higher interest rates, then that's going to skew the formula even more, make it even less of a wise decision to go ahead and purchase a home in majority of scenarios. Because if we're going to a higher interest rate loan because the banks won't approve us, then that means that we're going to be losing out on even more potential gain that we could have had that down payment into the stock market or into an investment property. We got to consider a risk tolerance, all right? So what I want to say here is, if we're going ahead and we have very low risk tolerance, and we would just really crave the security, then we could go ahead and just purchase the home just because we know that, hey, I'm going to purchase this home, I'm going to live in this home will appreciate, so I will likely gain some money over the long run, potentially, but again, potentially not, because if you actually take into consideration appreciation, if appreciation averages 3% a year on the property, and the loan that we got is 3% of the purchase price, that means that the appreciation we get on the home cancels out the appreciation from the banks on the loan, because we're paying 3% in interest, but our property is actually increasing 3%. That's actually canceling out technically. We're not actually gaining money from buying a house and living in a house. Next thing, when we talk about risk tolerance, we might not want to invest in the stock market just because we have something against it and we think, hey, it's volatile, we could lose money in it. And yeah, you could. That's why there's other options. We can go ahead and invest in multifamily properties. You can invest in a REIT, a real estate trust, where you actually just put in your money and they invest your money in properties, and you will get a return of 5% or so based on whatever they promise for returns. There's a lot of different ways to invest. I can't go into so many different things here, but you can invest based on your risk tolerance. The next thing is our investing skill, our skill level. Because if we're a highly knowledgeable and skillful investor, if we have a lot of experience in investing, then we can assume that we can potentially get greater returns on our investment with our money, rather than someone who's just getting into investing, doesn't have much knowledge, going to go for something that's more basic and conservative. Because again, the basic new investor will not have as much knowledge, experience, and connections to go ahead and get as great of returns as a new investor could. So if we have a low investing skill or no experience, no knowledge, then that's where we're going to want to lean more towards just buying the house. But if we have a little more investing skill and knowledge, and we do see the potential returns we could be getting on the down payment, then we're going to go ahead and use that money and invest it rather than lock it up in a house for a down payment. And the last one is self-control and the ability to delay gratification. If we have a high level of self-control and we have a really good ability at delaying gratification, then we can go ahead and use that money to invest in any other vehicle, because we know ourselves, we know that we can just dump in this money and say, hey, I don't need this money, I can put it away and take it out in 5 years and know that it's going to be greater than it was when I put it in, but I don't need it for the 5 years. I can just let it chill and hang out. I'm not going to be tempted just to take it out within a year or panic when I see something going on or some headline going on that we're going to go in recession, and I might panic and take it out. If we have a high level of self-control, then we're going to want to rent. We don't have a baseline of investing skill and knowledge, because those two combined, we can go ahead and deploy those dollars and have us returning more money, because we know we have the ability to control our emotions and we can delay the gratification and trust the process, trust our own ability that we're going to go ahead and get the greater return over the long run and not think so short term and be caught up in the short term swings of the markets. If we do know that we have a low level of self-control and we don't really trust ourselves, then we might want to lean towards just buying the house, because it could be the safer bet. At the end of the day, we need to know ourselves, and if we can rate ourselves on all of these things, we're going to know ourselves better, and we can make a better decision when it comes to buying versus renting. Combine this with the formulas I just provided you, you now have an quick, easy solution to figure out if it's better for you to actually buy a home and own it and live in it, or if it's better just to rent. You could just literally rent your entire life and invest the difference, and it could be potentially a greater investment. You could be increasing your net worth quicker and faster than if you just bought a house and lived in it. That's pretty fascinating. It depends on your scenario, it depends on all these different factors, but now you know how to go ahead and quickly and easily figure out if it's better for you to rent or buy. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like to see more of. If you really found value from this video, give it a thumbs up. And please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Share it with a friend, someone who is basically telling you to buy or someone's telling you to rent. Share this video with them so they can now use this formula to easily figure out what the best scenario is for themselves financially, and also from a qualitative perspective, because you can't just take numbers into consideration. We're humans. We need to take our own personal situations into consideration. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video.